Right, onwards we go, through hordes of unending, repeating monsters as we try to see if there's anything important in places we've essentially already cleared, but only just gained a very critical key. As major items go, I've seen far worse than the Mystic Key, and again, it's hard for me to be all that annoyed by things here, since again, this is the first of its kind released. But it's still kind of frustrating that we have to do this kind of backtracking. It's not like this is Metroid or anything similar to that, where backtracking is kind of part of the point as you gain more and more tools that unlock further sections of previous areas. And I'm pretty sure some of the sectors in some of the 2D Metroid games would not be quite as large as the Marsh Cave in this game, at the very least. It's a little hard for me to tell, though, since they're pretty massively different genres of games. I suppose the biggest similarity they have is that I don't like playing the absolute original release of the game, but still enjoy playing through each of them periodically. There are more re-releases of Final Fantasy 1 than there are of Metroid 1, though. PlayStation 1, PlayStation Portable, and the Pixel Remaster were released on plenty of systems. Whereas Metroid only has Zero Mission, which was released on the Game Boy Advanced, and then later the Game Boy Advance version was ported to the Switch. At least I think so. Nintendo just doesn't seem to feel as much of a need to re-release games as Square Enix does, and when they do, more often than not, it's a limited time offer, like with the Mario 3D collection they put on sale for the Switch. I wound up getting that bundle of 3 games and found myself annoyed that the only one of the 3 that really hooked me was Mario 64. The one I have the easiest time emulating, and that technically speaking doesn't really ask for much. Nintendo did not do any kind of improvements to those 3 games. At best they just made the control scheme for Sunshine a bit less of a pain to deal with. Whereas when Square Enix does a re-release of a game, they will try to go out of their way to improve what they can each time, though sometimes their visual changes are a bit off, and sometimes they skimp out on updating the soundtrack. But yeah, they just sometimes change their minds what needed to be changed from the source material with a given project. Now, with some games like Final Fantasy VIII, that can get a bit iffy, since one of the bigger issues people had with it was the junction system, and that is a much bigger pain in the ass to change around than Final Fantasy I's magic system. It is the absolute backbone for that game, whereas magic in this game isn't anywhere near as much of a backbone, even if 3 character classes use it extensively. Probably not much point in using this spell, but hey, we have plenty of MP to spare. By the way, why is it that the spell meant to destroy undead enemies looks spelled in a way that makes it very easy to end up mispronouncing it as diarrhea? I know that's not actually how it's pronounced, but it's still spelled close enough to it that my brain occasionally reads it as that instead of diarrhea. Right, first room with an unopened box, and of course the encounter rate doesn't change at all, despite the fact that we're casually going through a locked door. Hell, we didn't even get a notification for us unlocking a door with the key. On the one hand, I kind of appreciate that, since the sheer number of doors that key probably opens for us, it could easily become obnoxious to be slowed down by a text box saying we unlocked it over and over again. On the other hand, the key kind of becomes forgotten in our bag now that we have it, since we don't actively have to do anything with it. Hell, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of doors later on just don't bother needing a key, since we've already gained the only one we actually need for the entire game. Well, Blizzard doesn't seem to be all that much of an effect on them, but At least it's still more than Tyson's nunchucks and Morn's hammer. All that for an antidote? Please tell me the other item boxes still down here have some good stuff in them. I certainly remember there being an item absolutely critical to making progress down here. Right, 3 Pisco Demons. Not exactly something that makes me feel worried. At least not that we're going to lose, but it does make me a bit more cautious for each individual member of our team. Though again, it's kind of hard for me to consider these Mind Flayers as an important encounter, considering they repeat so much, whereas Astos and Garland are rather distinct. Fire doesn't seem all that much less effective than ice against these guys. Definitely closer to us losing a teammate in this fight than even some of the boss fights we've gone through so far. But then the first time we took casualties was a random encounter, not a boss fight or slightly more important fight, and we lost half our damn team there. Well, that's certainly better than an antidote. I'm sorry, but I'm not sure that silver is all that much better than copper as a defensive item. Hell, neither material's all that good when it comes to making armor or weapons. Wait. 4 of those damn mind-flaying bastards? I'm sorry, but what determines how many of these guys we have to deal with at a given time? They aren't quite the same as the random encounters we've been running into across the rest of the Marsh Caves, that's for sure. They are several steps above that in terms of difficulty. Down to 2. That's a bit less of a daunting number. Still a bit disconcerting, though. And that group's down. We're definitely gonna have to go back to town for a rest at the inn and some more supplies after this, that's for sure. Though I probably should have been using Cure more often to save on potions. Hell, the whole ability to use more Cure spells without having to go back to rest was one of the reasons I decided to go with this version of the game. Why am I still being so cautious with our magical resources anyway? When we've taken 4 on at once, 2 isn't nearly as scary. Kind of wish I knew what makes the enemy decide to attack which of our team. There's just so much that feels pretty random. And that makes it tough to really make a lot of tactical decisions, like will I heal this guy right here and now, or can I afford to wait? Anyway, that should do it for the Marsh Caves. Apparently I did misremember. The next major item is in Cornelia Castle. It's not really all that annoying of an issue, but it's still a bit embarrassing. You know, as I'm going through the Pixel remaster again while working on commentary for the PSP version, I can't help noticing that green slimes seem to be the most physically resistant of the slimes. The other slimes, while they might have more health, don't resist physical attacks nearly as well, so you're not pretty much forced to use black magic against them. It's easy to notice in the remaster, since that magic system makes me even more cautious of using magic of either variety. So I end up just stubbornly taking down at least 1 out of 3 green slimes with physical attacks, just to preserve a bit more of those magic charges. I'm not really sure if I'm really gonna notice that in the PSP version, though, since we have a lot more ammo for multiple target magic spells from our Black Mage. Anyway, time for some more ogres, wolves, and goblins as we backtrack again to get where we need to grab the next major item. I probably should have done something to make the wargs more of a priority, but we're so beyond both types of wolf that it's hard to really give a damn here. Again, that's a bit of an issue with random encounters. Sure, they're part of the overall experience, but when you've fought against the same monsters in the same configurations over and over again, they steadily stand less and less of a chance until they're a complete joke. And it's pretty easy to tell when that happens, since you're generally just holding down the confirm button and not really giving a damn where your attacks land. You just want the fight to be over with, and again, I don't do anywhere near as much grinding in something like Final Fantasy as I would in something like Pokemon. In Pokemon, there's less ground that can trigger random encounters. You're only allowed to have one of your team of 6 out at a time, and even in the oldest game, you can gain an obscene number of distinct party members. In Final Fantasy and games similar to it, anyone on your team will gain the same amount of experience as the other active members for the most part. The vast majority of the world is teeming with monsters, and outside of outliers like Suikoden, your team is very unlikely to get over a dozen characters strong. So there's just a lot less need to stop making progress and get some lagging member of the team to match the rest of the crew. Hell, even someone lagging behind is generally speaking not something I give a damn about outside of Pokemon and maybe Suikoden on occasion. Lady, can you please move? My mistake. That's a dead end. Again, I really wish the PSP version had the minimap, but again, that was only a thing in the Pixel Remaster. Not that it's all that much of an issue, since the Pixel Remaster is probably the easiest version of the game to gain at this point, but it's still something that makes me wonder why that quality of life improvement didn't show up until 2021. Metroid figured out they needed to throw in maps into the user interface in their third installment, all the way back in 1994. Again, completely different genre, but it's still kind of fun to think about, really. What makes game designers in various eras decide what to throw in for their various mechanics and user interface? Do maps actually detract from part of the original experience, since getting lost in castles or dungeons, or the overworld is technically part of the experience? Does the fact that I prefer the MP system introduced in later games mean I don't like the first game as much as I think I do? And why is it that taken me so long to figure out where the doors we can unlock in this castle are? I'm pretty sure the main reason I didn't fast forward through this is because we didn't have to deal with random encounters while I'm wandering around aimlessly. Hell, the ruined castle is barely different from the unruined castles. Seriously, all the castles have extremely similar layouts and the same tiles. And it doesn't help that I feel like the castles in several of the other 2D Final Fantasies use the same tile sets. That can really mess with my mental mapping, which isn't particularly great in two-dimensional environments anyway. And we're finally in the section of the castle we needed to be in. We'll see just how helpful this gear is. At the very least, one item is absolutely necessary for us to get to the next area. guess we found the critical item. Part of me wants to ask how long this nitro powder has been sitting in here, since, well, it's not exactly something that lasts anywhere near as long as some kind of mystical sword, especially since this isn't a world that generally has any guns of any kind, and I don't recall seeing any fireworks anywhere. The other just wants to laugh at the fact that the royal storeroom with items meant for the heroes of light doesn't have enough gear to give to really feel like a major upgrade for our team. With the exception of Tyson, we can just keep buying the various upgrades we need from various stores later on. Eventually, we'll start finding some especially nice gear in dungeons that money can't buy, especially the final dungeon, but that's still a far ways away from where we are right now. Anyway, that should about do it for this clip. All that's really left to do is some item shopping, getting potions, and whatever else, then get some rest in the inn. Next time, we work our way to an entirely different continent for whatever that's worth. I have no clue if we're going to have random encounters against things different from the wolves, ogres, and goblins we've been seeing over here, but I can certainly say we're getting close to restoring one of the 4 crystals. Just had a thought of another thing that differentiates the PSP from the Pixel Remaster. In the Pixel Remaster, there are a hell of a lot of more things available in the regular item shops all over the game. In all other versions, including this one, it depends on what town you're in if you can buy a cottage or a high potion.